What role do our self-perceived identities play in how we function politically, socially, and relationally? What role do our self-perceived identities play in how we function politically, socially, and relationally? And again, this is a conversation starter.
I think I'll start since really moving through the world, I am a man who used to be a female, and so I didn't have what people like to think of as a full sex change, and I still have a vagina. So my vagina and my body has become very political. It's my political activism in a way that I challenge the world on the thought process of what it means to be female, what it means to be male, do you need a penis to be a man? So really, on some level, my being, my presence in the world and when I interact with people, because most of you probably didn't even know I used to be female. And I can always hear that energy or feel that energy when I say, I'm a man with a vagina. And everyone just can't even believe that. It's a compliment. I take it as a compliment. But at the same time, I understand what I'm doing is I'm opening your mind. Just because my body does not align with the thought process that we have been told what makes you a man and what makes you a woman.
Thank you.
So
Chandresh?
I have to share the Eastern wisdom tradition on this topic. So there's a mantra that we meditate in the Eastern traditions. It's called Shuddh Chaitanya, which means pure consciousness. So we are trained and told and asked to meditate on this mantra simply because this is considered our source, our identity, the cosmic identity, that we are born as pure consciousness. And as we grow, we start to become corrupted. Someone, tells you, you are a Hindu, this is what you should do. You are a Muslim, this is what you should do. And we start to corrupt ourselves with all the ideas. And somewhere the innocence, the pure consciousness is no more pure. It starts to take different shapes, different flow. It starts to suppress itself. It's like a river which was flowing smoothly at one moment, and then it starts to destruct itself and everything around it. And I'll briefly share one incident. I did this talk in Amsterdam many years ago, and it was all about mantras, consciousness, and stuff. And one gentleman who was sitting in the front row, he came to me after the talk. He said, so I love what you teach. I want to do everything that you shared. Do I have to be a Hindu to do what you do? I said, you have to undo everything. That's what I have been doing. Undo all the beliefs, all the ideologies that you have. That's how we can relate to each other, because rigid identities
So
limit
instead
ourselves.
of being a Hindu, you're being an undo?
Undo.
He's undo.
I'm undo.
I love it. Undo.
I think the key word in that is self-perceived identities. And as he was saying, we're born pure consciousness, and then there's an imprint that happens. And that imprint from society, biological imperatives, cultural, historical, racial, we're imprinted with those particular vibrations. We begin to see ourselves that way, and a lot of that side is unconscious. We move through the world with those self-perceived identities, and so therefore we make our choices and our decisions and our actions based on that limited perception. So the idea is to not throw away those identities, but we look at those identities more as a light bulb through which the light of pure consciousness shines through. So we don't throw away our culture. We don't throw away our temporal identities, but they're used as a place through which the divine can express through. Now, when an individual is not conscious of their self-perceived identity, their choices are very limited, because they're only choosing from this small perception, and sometimes those choices do not include everyone. It only includes their own particular way that they're focusing. And then that is often why sometimes we can't come together in a level that we can't transcend those identities, then
Right.
we can't have peace.
Right. What I liked was, Chandresh, you called it corruption. We corrupt ourselves, and the word you used was imprint.
Yes.
And I like looking at the different languaging, because it starts to give us different facets of the idea. The word imprint itself has its own connotations, and the word corruption has its own connotations. Rotana, did you want to address that question?
Yeah, I think I I have said, my perspective is I'm listening to all of you guys, and it sounds so evolved, and I feel like there's a primitiveness to me finding my identity as an immigrant, because I felt, as I talked about in the talk, as an immigrant, I felt my identity sometimes felt bound by immigration systems and like survival modes, like things that I needed to do to survive dictated what identity I was going to move with in order to stay here, in order to secure my place. And that's a really low vibration place of being.
Right.
So I'm really interested in, I think I've begun to transcend that, and again, I talked about it in the talk. I think the biggest thing to identify is that I was really oppressing myself. I've been through this journey here of kicking and screaming and being like, I'm oppressed, I'm oppressed, I'm oppressed. But the truth is, I'm a lot more liberated than I was. I just was playing this role of oppressed Saudi girl because I thought that was what I was. But the truth is, I really wasn't as oppressed as I thought I was.
Right. No, I appreciate that. So at that level of identification, that's survival.
Yeah.
You have to be able to, it's like growing up, you know, when I saw the police, I had to act a certain way in order to survive.
Yeah.
And so I had to think of myself as a young black guy moving through the hood.
Yeah.
And if I saw the police behind me, there was a certain vibration.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of incidences that we won't go into that occurred. So that's at that level of identity, we live from survival. I got to make it through another day.
Yeah.
But what you did, what I hear you saying, is that at some point you transcended that as your total identity. You don't get rid of it. You came from another place. There's still a lot of stuff going on in America that's not cool. But how we become safe is in that larger identity, the vibration of that identity. And I think that's what we're all trying to do. Yeah.
And so in the, like in American politics, for example, we're starting to see more and more of these new candidates campaigning for the 2020 presidential election, some friends of ours even. And so when we see this, we start to see a few different things happen. We start to see them sort of piggyback each other's ideas. We start to see different aspects of each individual. Oh, Tulsi's the one who's Indian, and Pete's the one who's gay. And we start to see the identity politics start to come into play. We start to see, I remember one interview that I saw that I thought was particularly interesting, especially as it relates to identity. Marianne Williamson was being introduced on a political show for her candidacy for the Democratic nomination for presidency, and they called her Oprah's spiritual advisor.
Oh, wow.
And she made it a point on that episode to say, let's get this straight. I'm not Oprah's spiritual advisor. Just because Oprah read a couple of my books and I was on her show a few times doesn't mean that I'm her spiritual advisor. These things matter. And so on that level, what kind of things do we start to see? Well, we see division, right? We start to see division. We start to see things like our identity used to differentiate us, to separate us. And so from a social perspective and from a political, collective, governmental perspective, we find that in the States, we say on the surface, there's the two major political parties. But we also know who rules all money. And so in the world, money. Money rules all of these things, right? Of course we know that money doesn't really rule, right, Reverend?
But in that particular paradigm, it does.
Right, in the political paradigm, it is currently who's making all the decisions is the dollar bill, money. And so in a world that is run and corrupted by these large systems that are moving all of the resources of this planet, in a world where all of those forces are controlled by financial interests, we start to see our identities being exploited and candidates being propped up. Oh, this guy's gonna get the gay vote. Oh, this person can get this other constituency. And so how do we see that from each of our worldviews here? How do we relate to what's happening on a larger scale? How do we relate to what's happening socially, politically, and economically in a way that's going to be meaningful? Are we able to bridge that gap? I'll read the actual question. Is it possible to bridge the gap or sense of separation from one another as a measure for greater world sustainability and harmony? Is it possible to bridge the gap or sense of separation from one another as a measure for greater world sustainability and harmony?
I feel the sense of separation exists because we start to identify with our identity in a very strong and rigid way. So if I identify, as a man too strong, I'm going to limit my life experiences. One of the first lessons that I learned in my spiritual training was embrace the feminine within. Only then you can be a true man. And at that time I thought, what does it mean? Does it mean wearing a pink jeans and a yellow top and crying every evening? And I was a teenager. That was my definition of feminine as a teenager. And what I learned throughout the years was being feminine is being compassionate, receptive, healing, intuitive, guiding, and protective at the same time, which I truly missed as a teenager because the definition of masculine around me was so wrong. And I feel how we can teach or train the political parties and society at large is by giving them a message that I do not identify as just a man, just my gender or the role I play, the job I do. I exist as a pure awareness. I mean, I'm speaking from a spiritual perspective that I exist as a spiritual awareness. And you cannot control me, you cannot dictate your rules on me simply by putting me in a different category. Does it make sense? Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, it feels like people have stopped being guided by their values and they're just looking for what is familiar. But I think that to really, really identify your values, that takes a lot of work. And I think that we've grown very lazy and we don't actually know what our values are. And to me, that is boundless. That's not bound by identity. And values should be what is driving everything. And I can't vote, but that's what I try to kind of align myself with. Is this person speaking to my values? And then I realized this year, what are my values? I haven't actually done enough work to really understand what my values are here in a place that I'm trying to become a citizen of. So I'm now giving myself the responsibility of learn your own values before I can even start to look at these candidates and have an opinion.
Right, beautiful.
Right, but I think that's the key. When we all line up and ask what our values are, there's some basic values, of love and of safety and creativity and safety for our children, et cetera, et cetera. So the question says, can we, is it possible? I think we have to shift it to how can we bridge the gap? And I think if we ask that kind of question, then we'll start to be guided, we'll start to get answers intuitively as to that will become important to us. But as she's kind of intimating, sometimes that's not important to us.
Right.
Because we want to stay in our limited perception, and from our limited perception, get what we want. But if we ask that question, how can we bridge the gap, then we open ourselves up to another intuitive hit from the universe as to how to do that. But that must be important to us. And if we ask what our values are, pretty much across the board, there are certain things we all want.
Right.
And then we can go from there.
And so, yeah, that's interesting. The idea of values, the idea of ideals being something that we start to look at. Looking at our own actions and our own behaviors and thoughts. What am I showing that I value through what I'm actually doing and saying and releasing out into the world? But then also, what do I want to value? What is it that we have changes of heart. We have those corruptions, those imprints where racist behavior is learned, dysfunctional behavior, homophobic behavior, all different kinds of oppressive behavior programs are learned.
I feel we need more mentors who can teach the kids and children that we are part of collective consciousness. Our identities are much bigger than what they are told, what they are taught in school or through media. And I want to ask everyone, actually, do you think the emerging of digital age, that's affecting this whole corruption also? Because I feel online, we see much more hate, much more violence. And I know you mentioned psychic violence also. And I would love to, talk about that.
In the next question.
In the next one.
Yeah, I want to talk to the digital age for sure, because I
Thank
deal
you.
with a lot of transgender children today, and there is a lot of bullying online, way more than when I was a child. I'm 56 years old, and I transitioned 23 years ago without this type of digital age that we have today. So what I see is fear, anger, hate, and I see that coming from the outside world towards the transgender community, because the internet or digital age allows people to say whatever they feel like saying. And stay anonymous.
Right,
And
right.
this is hugely dangerous. So I also want to speak to bridging the gap. And for me, bridging the gap, and really also what you said about masculine and feminine, is a really big part of my message. And I, as a transgender man, had to learn how to accept my feminine side, which is something I refused to accept when I was feminine and when I was a female. I hated myself. I tried to commit suicide. I was an alcoholic, drug addict, cutter, everything you can name in the book. I should not be sitting here today. But I am here
We're so
because the
grateful you
universe
are.
asked me to be here, and I know that. I have been given a gift of being male and female. It is a true
Yes.
gift, and I thank you for that. But it is something that I had to learn through my own pain and anguish of living as a female. And until I could accept what does it mean to be a man and a woman, and what does it mean to be masculine and feminine, nobody in this room can answer that question. Nobody, because it comes to how you feel about your own self. Can you imagine walking the world as a man with a vagina? Think about it for 1 minute. It is powerful. It is not in any way, shape, or form do I feel less than any man in this room. I feel, in fact, very powerful with my vagina.
Yes.
Because it will get your attention.
Yes.
And that is one of the messages that I want people to understand here today, is what defines you. It is not your genitals, my friends.
Fabulous. Okay, let's go to the third topic. Okay, so this is more what you were going for. In what ways can the cutting-edge creatives, artists, musicians, writers, healers, and the avant-garde most effectively support social and political causes? Is it possible to do so without any violence whatsoever, even psychic violence, like hatred, bitterness, and gossip? Before we get into this, there are two major poles that identity politics falls upon along this spectrum. And one end of the spectrum is, we all don't like this thing together, and we identify as people who don't like this thing. And the other end is, we all like this thing. We're all the same in this other way. And so these are the two bipolar ways that identity politics is used. So I'm going to read this topic one more time. What ways can the cutting-edge creatives, artists, musicians, writers, healers, and the avant-garde most effectively support social and political causes? And is it possible to do so without any violence whatsoever, even psychic violence, like hatred, bitterness, and gossip?
Well, when you use the word cutting edge, you're actually talking about individuals who are so full to overflowing with possibility and vision about what can be. And the motivating energy behind them is being pulled by that energy. So they don't spend a lot of time trying to put something down. They spend more time articulating the possibility and then walking in that direction, if they're cutting edge. You know, and so that's what separates a cutting edge artist from a regular artist. They actually can describe a vision and let's say, let's walk in that direction. And then they have the potency of inspiration that moves people and motivates people to walk in that direction. So that is the role of an artist. That's the role of an individual that's on the cutting edge. They have to go within themselves and actually live the frequency of that possibility even before it manifests.
Yeah.
And then they walk in it. Yeah.
I think also, and this maybe is a strange response. Where is Haley? I can't find her. My co-writer's here. She taught me this. Specificity, I think, is one of the most powerful things in the world as a storyteller and as an artist, because when you are incredibly specific about your story and your experience, there's nowhere to hide, there's no one to blame, you have to take ownership. So because as an artist, when I started off, I was incredibly scared to be specific, because I was like, no one's gonna relate, it has to be this thing, and I have all these things that I wanna address, and Haley, my co-writer, is like, no, you be as specific as possible, because then there's nowhere to hide, and it's all on you. And so, yeah, specificity is what's coming to mind.
Yeah,
I
and
think it's a really powerful
specificity,
tool.
It's a dimension of honesty
I was gonna
Yes.
say that.
and integrity. Yeah,
Yeah, honestly.
beautiful. Chandresh?
I feel every artist is a healer in some way. I feel more healing coming from storytellers than from the spiritual healers many times, because they radiate healing in very powerful way, and I'm a big advocate of being a conscious rebel. I feel rebelliousness with awareness is what we need. Everyone is being a rebel, but awareness is missing. And when awareness walks in, then you start to speak your story. You start to speak your truth with no fear. There's more courage, more clarity, more gratitude for the existence, and that story starts to create more compassion. There's more collective awareness. And I felt that when Buck was here, sharing his story, that there's definitely awareness, there's rebelliousness. Obviously, when Rotana was singing, there was rebelliousness, but there was also awareness of respect of everyone's journey. And I feel we just need to cultivate more of that conscious rebelliousness and encourage people that it's not a popularity contest. Continue to speak your truth, even if it brings you, less followers in some way. Reverend.
Something that one of my teachers told me, she said, if you go deep, it's not a small group. No matter how small the group is, if you go deep, it wasn't small.
Absolutely.
There's power there. There's an old saying, one with God is a majority. If you go
What was
deep,
that saying? Can you say
one
it?
with God is a majority. It's really
Wow.
unanimous. But when you go deep, you find the vibration of truth. And so there could be 20 million lies. But if you're going deep enough and find the truth of your being and reality, that dissolves the lies. You become impervious to it. And so I think that's what your teacher meant.
Yes. Yeah, beautiful, fabulous.
I think even when we start to speak as storytellers, healers, and teachers, our job should not be to change everyone in the room, but even if one person could be changed, that should be the victory. So speak to change just one person. I think that will start to create enough awareness out there. And then the tribe builds. But when you start working for that only one motto, that I just want to build the tribe, just want to build the followers, I think that's where somewhere we start getting corrupted. Yeah.
Right. Mm. Well, I so appreciate all of you and everything that you've shared. Do we want to do some Q&A with the audience?
Absolutely.
So what I'll do is I'll repeat the questions so that they're clear on live stream. This is all being live streamed on the Evolve and Ascend Facebook page. Again, the topic is identity politics. So there was a lot that came up just now. Is there anything that anyone in the audience would like to ask our panelists?
There was someone over there.
Well, actually, hearing what you're saying, since I'm probably one of the oldest people here, and I know that this generation is going to make a big impact on our politics and our life around us, I'm just wondering how many people here are actually registered to vote? Wow, that's amazing.
I can't vote.
And then my last question is, how many of you actually vote in your local politics? Freaking amazing.
Good job, people.
That's all I wanted to know, because that's what I care about for the younger generation. I have a daughter who's 21, and the life that we have depends on us.
Well, I think that brings up something so important. In the conversation around identity politics, what's coming up for me is the reality of the true values, the deeper truth that's underlying all of the facade, all of the pretend, all of the campaigning. And it kind of comes down to this notion that each of us individually has to actually be willing to go deep. When we vote, we have to actually be willing to go deep in our decisions of who we're voting for. And it is so challenging because there's so many things to vote on. There's so many things that are intentionally slipped in there so that the construction lobby can get an extra $10 billion over here, and so that the steel lobby can get an extra. Yeah, so exactly. And so there's all these different things that are intentionally challenging to go through. So if there's anything that you guys might want to just offer, we're not getting a lot of gregarious questions, but anything, oh, we have a couple that came up. What's your, Michael is the mic runner. I'll repeat.
Thank you all so much.
Hello.
First of all, you're all beautiful. Hello. Yeah, you're all so beautiful. Thank you. I just wanted to ask, how do you individually define an ally? Like, what are you looking for in fellow human beings who maybe have different struggles than you, but are able to offer something? What would you want that something to be?
Allies are very, very important to the fight and to the war, which specifically for my community, the transgender community. An ally would be somebody who would believe in us and understand our message with respect, not necessarily understand it, because I know many people don't understand what this is at all, and they might have their own opinion about it. But allies in any community and anything for me are somebody who believes in your message and wants to help your message get to a wider audience.
Understanding. The key word is the willingness to try to understand what another person's struggle is. Not projecting their stuff on that individual, but just walking in this skin for this amount of years, there's a lot that has gone on, and I think it's mainly understanding. We were looking at some of the things going on in Washington, D.C. right now, where there's go-go music played in Washington, D.C. Go-go music comes out of Washington, D.C. And there's a particular place where they play it every morning to wake up the businesses. So now other cultures have moved in and started complaining about the music, not understanding that was a part of a cultural, it's like going into Harlem during the time when there was jazz there. Yeah. And so they wanted the black people to stop playing this music in the morning. So the black people the next week showed up on the street corner playing it louder. But there was a lack of understanding that this was a part of their culture, our culture. And then very recently, in the last couple of days, some of the people who've moved into DC were using Howard University yard as the place to walk their dogs and put the excrement. This is where the students hang out. And one of the guys says, well, if you don't want us walking our dogs there, you should just move the university. This is a 150-year-old university, historically black college. There's no understanding of the culture. Just come in, entitled, do what I want to do. So understanding is a key word. And then understanding brings compassion. Compassion brings right action. You have to have an understanding.
Yes. And it brings a human feeling to it. We have now banned transgender people from the military. Do you understand that? We have banned people like me.
As strong as you are,
from being in the military just because we don't fit into this mold of what society says makes you male or female. These are things you people, everybody in the world should be paying attention to, because that does not only affect my community, it affects your community, because once they start taking one thing away, they will start taking other things away. And it's important for us to pay attention to everything that goes on in this world.
It's interesting, I'm listening to you guys speak, and understanding is as a Saudi woman, is something that I know that I'm not really, there's many people in my life where I'm not ever going to really achieve understanding from. They're not going to understand my choices and the way that I live my life. But for example, with my mother, who absolutely doesn't understand a lot of my choices, she's not aware of many of them too, but I've realized that with my mom, I can achieve empathy without getting her understanding. And with my mom, the extent of, and she's still my ally, but I've had to come to terms that I'm never going to get emotional empathy from my mother in certain choices that I've made, but I can get cognitive empathy from her, in the sense that she can say, this is what makes you happy, this is what you need to do to be you. Okay, fine, I can empathize with that experience in a cognitive way, and I've had to say, okay, I accept that. Even though you can't feel me, you are cognitively trying to align yourself with me, and to me, that's enough I'll take that as an ally. And I wonder what you guys think about that, if you feel like that's compromise. Because in the beginning I thought it was, but then I'm happier as a result of it.
She's doing the best that she can do.
She's doing the best that she can do. And I think that sometimes our allies, they're not perfect. And yeah.
I feel, most people are acting best from their level of awareness. So even if they look ignorant, it's just their ignorant awareness then. And I feel three of you have covered so many important points. What I would say is respect. That's number one thing. Even if you come from a different culture, different ideology, different political or religious beliefs, respect is most fundamental thing that we can offer to each other. Number two, as Reverend said, willingness to learn. No one is born as learned being. We all are learning, and information is available everywhere. So just willingness to learn is needed. Even 5 minutes of willingness to learn every day about different cultures, that makes a difference. And finally, there's acceptance and compassion. That's the consequence of willingness to learn and showing respect. Acceptance just happens on its own then.
There's something so interesting that's threaded itself through this entire conversation, and it began when you mentioned corruption, and then you said imprint, and now we're talking about learning and understanding. That initial corruption that takes place, everyone had in their own way. And so there's this interesting notion of learning. We don't call learning the same thing as corruption, even though it's an imprint. It's something that's being brought into the nervous system, brought into the mind, aligned with the etheric bodies, and made manifest in all different kinds of ways in our life experiences, And so this idea of identity, identifying with unity consciousness, identifying with a spiritual higher level of consciousness, or you could say higher, you could say deeper, but the idea is it's on the vertical plane. Going deeper, going fuller, going, up or down, expanding.
Going beyond the mind.
Yeah,
right?
beyond the mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so it's this interesting idea that's been presented where there's imprints, there's corruptions, and then when a spark of willingness is incited, an openness, a willingness, then we can start to move consciously with what we're developing, so that we can say, you know what, I'm going to be open to understanding you. When I came out to my Mormon parents, that wasn't very fun. They were like, but is bisexual the one where you can still marry a woman?
Is it bisexual?
Yeah. And I said, yeah, that is what it is. That's
the possibility.
the one. Yep. Good talk. Yeah, so that was a really fulfilling exchange that I had with them that first time. But no, the reality was that my mother was open. They were open. They had no clue what to do with that. They had no idea, no reference point for any of that, but they were open to it. They were more open to that than when I stopped cutting my hair short. The longer hair seemed to bother them more. And so this idea of willingness coming in around consciousness, and then a conscious establishment of what we're learning, willing to learn, willing to understand, willing to learn from each other. Like you mentioned specifically cultures. Culture, Terence McKenna used to say, culture is our operating system.
Yeah.
And so you said that, you used the word Hindu and corruption. The idea is that there was like the corruption that came in that said, you're actually not one with cosmic consciousness, you're Hindu. And also maybe within that.
I have to mention, growing up in India, it was fascinating because I went to Catholic school for 12 years, and then I moved to New York after that, because the Catholic schools were the best schools in the small towns. And I was being raised in a Hindu family, and my father would send me to Buddhist monasteries, Sikh temples, mosques in India to meditate. And my friends would ask me, why do you go to all these places? You are a Hindu, you should only go to temples. And I'm so glad. I was so innocent about religion and God. I said, I don't know, I just feel great there, so I accompany my father. And then they started questioning what exactly your father do, because we thought he's a spiritual leader, but he should be only going to temple. But that became the foundation of breaking the norms. That's why I wrote the book, Break the Norms, because it really set the foundation that we all are part of this one collective consciousness. I have experienced equal emotional charge, growth, and energy in all the different places. Could be shrine, could be a mosque, could be a Buddhist monastery. I have tasted the same fragrance everywhere. So I truly feel we are connected with the same thread. Doesn't matter the identity, what it is, yeah.
Fabulous. Did you want to share something or say anything before we take another question?
We had one question from
One more
someone,
question?
yeah.
Was that? I got this one.
Thank you. My question is just in politics. For me, I was not always a voter. And then when I finally did start voting, it became really confusing for me, right? Like, just like I go to Agape, Michael makes sense to me. If he was running, that would be easy. Just saying. But you know, there are people actually running who I do know. Like Marianne Williamson was our church pastor when I was growing up in Michigan, and you know, I know people in a certain way. But that doesn't mean, and I'm not saying I'm against her. I'm just saying that doesn't mean that I'm going to vote for her because I'm still trying to figure it all out, right? So how do you guys? I mean, obviously, yes, you watch TV or you, but to me, that's so unintimate about really what I know about these possibilities.
So how do the panelists look through the options and make their decisions? Take it away.
Well, since you brought up Marianne Williamson, you know, she covers a plethora of ideals that I agree with. I want her to be on the main stage to put those ideas out for dialogue so that, as you said earlier, so that people can actually begin to steal those ideals from her and put it on their plank, like reparations. She was the first to deal with reparations for African Americans. Now people are pandering towards African Americans regarding that particular issue. She has other issues as well. So what I'll do is I'll look, and at the end, when we actually have a candidate, you know, I'll go inside and see who resonates, and then I will vote. The voting, when Barack Obama was running with Hillary Clinton, I didn't choose yet. I just watched both of them. And then I met Barack Obama, and then we had a private meeting with me and about 5 other ministers. And then he went outside and spoke to a large group of people. I still hadn't made my choice yet. I wasn't going to vote for him just because he was a black man. And he stood up and he said, if I'm elected president, I'm going to be the first president to go to the Middle East and apologize for dethroning the democratically elected leaders there, thus fomenting the terrorism we're now facing. He said this publicly. And I said, what? Somebody's saying this out loud? Wow. Now, whether that was going to happen or not, I knew he knew that information. I said, okay, I'm with Barack, because he carried the frequency of what I believed, you see. So I think you sit, you wait, you watch, you study. You sit, you think, you wait, you watch, and you study, and then you see what your intuition, a signal will happen, a sign will arise, and you say, oh, that's the one.
What I think is so special about the part of the process right now that we're in is that we do have people like Tim Ryan and Marianne Williamson running for president, and there are the DNC qualifications to actually get on that main stage, to be able to actually debate at the Democratic National Convention. And what's interesting to me about that is that that's based on a number of individual unique donations made to each individual candidate. And so each individual candidate has to earn 65,000 individual donations from 20 different states in order to be able to participate in that. So right now, even though Marianne Williamson is super sharp, she knows her stuff, she just did her CNN town hall, presidential town hall, epic, blew everybody out of the water. I like Marianne, I'm voting for Marianne. Even though she's very intelligent, has proven herself in 1,000 different ways, there's still this part of the process where it's tethered directly to finances. She must get 65,000 individual humans to make a donation of $1 or more to her campaign in order to even, in 20 different states, in order to even have her name be thrown into the hat to be a part of the debate process.
That wasn't a question, that was a statement.
That was a statement. I think,
and it's a true statement.
Yeah, and I think that the idea really in this is that the identities that each of us have are conditioned for good, for better or for worse, by the things that we experience. and the way we relate to them. So as we become more conscious, like you two especially were saying, as we become more conscious and more open to being understanding and the values, we start to relate to each other better. We start to see our own identities change. I'm not just some white guy from Colorado.
No.
I'm part of, you. I'm part of this black guy over here.
Absolutely,
From
yeah.
where? From where?
Washington, D.C.
From D.C. There we go.
Growing up in L.A.
Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. I'm so excited about this message, about taking the idea of unity consciousness out into our political decisions, seeing higher ideals manifest on the political playing field. So thank you all for
Can
everything
I say
you shared.
Thank you, Ben.
Can I say a
Yes.
closing comment as
Yes,
well?
please.
Two closing comments. One, Dr. Howard Thurman, great mystical theologian, once said that it is impossible to love humanity in general. You can only love humanity in particular, which means the person sitting next to you, the person you don't know, the person that's not like you. So to say that you love humanity is an abstract concept and carries no weight at all. You actually have to love the person you're around. You have to interact with people that don't look like you, that don't think like you, in order to build the beloved community. And then secondly, I think we all have to be aware that though there's a political system, there are worlds that can be built outside of the system. And that each of us can actually do things that entrepreneurially, creatively, that transcend the political system totally, and we can begin to build the kind of world we want to live in, regardless of the political system as it is today.
Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for having me this afternoon, and I just want to hopefully leave you with this message that I have been given this gift, and I hope that you hear that from me, and I hope that you understand that you are who you are, and find that space in who you are, and use that space to make change, whatever that means, even if it's only within your family. But you have the power to make change, whether you believe it or not. I never thought I would be sitting in a space I am in today. I thought I would be dead, but here I am. And so I want you to really feel that from me. My life means a lot to me. It's a gift, and your life is a gift. And I know people in this room know that. I'm in a very special room right now, but I need you to hear what I'm saying, and that masculine and feminine is just a concept.
Thank you, Buck.
One thing I would just want to share, start relating to yourself in a new way every day. If you relate to yourself only through the lens of your parents, society, media, religion, then you will miss out a huge possibility of what's out there. And when you start to relate to yourself in a new, aware ways, that's how you can relate to your politicians, spiritual teachers, your siblings, partners, family, also in a new way. So open up how you are relating.